found myself standing in the hallway of our lake house, holding 2 cups of coffee that had already gone cold. My wife wasn't in the kitchen where she said she'd be. My brother-in-law's truck was still parked outside. I'd only been gone 40 minutes. A quick drive down to the marina to pick up the fishing permits my son had asked about. 40 minutes. I set the cups down on the side table without thinking. Didn't even notice I'd done it until later. The lake house had been in my family for 22 years. I bought it the summer our youngest started middle school. Back when I was still working 60-hour weeks at the shipping company and my wife kept saying we needed somewhere to slow down, somewhere that wasn't the city. So I found it. 3 bedrooms, a screened porch, a dock that needed replacing every few years. We celebrated everything there. Birthdays, graduations, 4th of July. My wife always said it was her favorite place on earth. I believed her. I believed a lot of things. That weekend was supposed to be our 40th anniversary. Not a party. We talked about keeping it small. Just the family. Our son drove up from Cincinnati. Our daughter flew in from Portland with her husband and the grandkids. My brother-in-law and his wife, my wife's younger sister, were supposed to come Saturday morning, but he'd shown up Friday evening alone, said my sister-in-law had a migraine and would follow the next day. I didn't think anything of it. He'd been part of our family for over 30 years. He knew where the extra key was kept. He knew which drawer had the bottle opener and which burner on the stove ran hot. He knew everything about our life because we'd let him in. I walked down the short hallway toward the back bedroom. The door was half open. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought I'd misread the situation entirely. Maybe I thought I'd feel foolish for even hesitating. I did not feel foolish. I stood there for what felt like a very long time, long enough that the sounds I was hearing arranged themselves into something my brain refused to process for several seconds. Then it did process, and the floor felt like it shifted. I walked back to the kitchen. I picked up both cups of coffee. I poured them down the sink. I stood at the window looking out at the dock and watched a heron land on one of the posts and just stand there, completely still, like it had nowhere to be. My name is Warren. I'm 63 years old. I spent 40 years building a life with a woman I thought I knew completely. I raised 2 kids in a house I was proud of, took every vacation seriously, showed up to every recital and graduation and hospital visit and holiday dinner. I coached Little League for 6 years even though I was never much of a baseball guy. I drove my mother-in-law to her chemotherapy appointments every Tuesday for 14 months because my wife had to work and her brother-in-law, my brother-in-law now too, I thought, lived 40 minutes in the wrong direction. I did all of it. I did all of it because I thought that's what you did when you loved someone. I did not go back down that hallway. Not that afternoon. Instead, I walked out to the dock and sat there until the heron got bored of me and flew off over the water. I thought about 40 years. I thought about our wedding, which was small and a little disorganized because my wife's mother had strong opinions about the seating chart and we ran out of ice halfway through the reception. I thought about the first apartment we shared, which smelled like the previous tenant's cigarettes for 2 full years, no matter what we did. I thought about the way she used to reach over in the middle of the night and squeeze my hand when she was having a bad dream, not even fully awake, just reaching. I thought about my brother-in-law giving the toast at our 25th anniversary dinner, how he'd stood up and said I was the best man he knew, how everyone had laughed and cried a little, how I'd shaken his hand afterward and meant it when I said he was family. I sat on that dock for almost 2 hours when I heard the screen door open and the sound of my son's footsteps on the wood planks. I didn't turn around right away. He sat down next to me. He didn't say anything immediately. My son is 34 years old and he has always been better at silence than most people. He gets that from my side, I think. His grandfather was the same way. Could sit with you through the worst kind of news without flinching, without rushing to fill the air. "Dad," he said finally, "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've been out here for 2 hours and you missed lunch and Lily's been asking where Grandpa is." Lily is my granddaughter. She's 5. Her asking for me should have pulled me back inside immediately. It didn't, not yet. Give me a few more minutes, I said. He gave me a few more minutes. Then he said, Dad, I need to tell you something. I looked at him then. His face was doing something complicated. He looked like he had when he was 12 and had broken the garage window with a baseball and spent 3 hours trying to figure out how to tell me. I know, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. How long have you known? About 2 hours. He exhaled slowly. He rubbed his hands on his jeans the way he does when he's working through something. I've known for longer than that, he said. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to. I was trying to figure out the right way. I looked back at the water. How much longer? I found out about 6 weeks ago. My wife, she saw something on my aunt's phone when they were together. She told me. I didn't believe it at first. He stopped. I wanted to be sure before I said anything to you. I didn't want to blow up your life over a misunderstanding. 6 weeks. He'd been carrying that for 6 weeks. I didn't say anything right away. I thought about what that must have been like for him. Sitting with that knowledge, coming up here for this anniversary weekend, knowing what he knew. Watching his mother set out the anniversary cake his sister had ordered from the bakery in town. Watching his uncle carry in grocery bags and make coffee and act like a man with nothing to hide. You should have told me, I said, but I didn't say it with anger. I'm not sure I had anger yet. It was more like standing in a field after a storm, looking at what the wind had knocked over. I know, he said. I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you. I put my hand on his shoulder. He's 34 years old and he's taller than me now by almost 2 inches, and I still sometimes see the 12-year-old with the broken window. You did protect me, I said. You just did it in your own way. We sat there a little longer. Then he said, there's something else. I waited. I wasn't just trying to figure out what to say. I got some help. From a friend of mine who does IT work. With tracking software. On some accounts. He said it carefully, watching my face. I have documentation, Dad. Emails. Dates going back almost 2 years. Financial records, too. I think he's been moving money. Small amounts at a time. From the joint accounts you two had when you were helping them out after his business went under. I stared at him. The business. 4 years ago, my brother-in-law's landscaping company had collapsed under him. Bad contracts, a foreman who'd been skimming, then a brutal winter that wiped out 3/4 of their client base in a single season. My wife and I had lent them $60,000 to help them stay afloat, interest-free. Because they were family. Because that's what you did. How much? I said. My son told me. I'm not going to write the exact number here because some things still make me feel a kind of sick that I don't want to put into words. What I will say is that it was not a small amount. It was not the kind of amount you move by accident or confusion. It was the kind of amount that requires intention over a long period of time by someone who knew exactly where to look and trusted that you weren't watching. I stood up. I was very calm. That surprised me. The calm. I thought I might be angry, or that I might come apart the way I'd seen other men come apart in bad moments. Instead, I just felt something settle in me. Something cold and clear and decided. Show me, I said. My son had it all on his laptop, organized into folders. He'd worked with his friend for weeks, carefully, methodically. Emails between my wife and my brother-in-law going back almost 2 years, some of them personal, some of them not. Transfers from the account my wife and I had set up specifically to help them during the hardship period. 12 transfers over 19 months, always under amounts that would trigger the bank's automatic alerts, always to a secondary account in his name alone. It was not passion. That's what I kept thinking as I looked through those folders. Whatever had started as emotion between them had long since become something else. It had become a habit, a system, a shared project. They had become collaborators. My sister-in-law, his wife, my wife's own sister. She had no idea. I was certain of that. She had driven 4 hours the next morning through a headache that turned out to be a sinus infection, because that's the kind of woman she is. She would have no idea. The next morning, when everyone was gathered for what was supposed to be the anniversary brunch, mimosas, my daughter's homemade quiche, the kids running around the yard chasing each other, I watched my wife move around the kitchen like she always had, laughing at something my son-in-law said, refilling her sister's coffee without being asked, looking at ease in her own life. She was very good at it. I'll give her that. She was very good at looking like a woman who had nothing to be ashamed of. I watched my brother-in-law carry the pitcher of orange juice to the table and say something to my granddaughter about her drawing, and I thought about 30+ years. I thought about the toast at our anniversary dinner. I thought about how my wife used to say he was like the brother she never had. I did not make a scene at the brunch. I want to be clear about that. I had thought about this, lying awake the night before while my wife slept beside me, and I stared at the ceiling and made decisions. I had thought about what I wanted from this moment and what I owed to the people in that house who had done nothing wrong: my daughter, my son-in-law, my grandchildren, and above all my sister-in-law, who had come down with a real sinus infection and was still there because she wanted to celebrate our anniversary. I let the brunch happen. I ate quiche and drank coffee and held my granddaughter on my lap when she wanted to show me her drawing, which was of a horse wearing a birthday hat for reasons she couldn't fully explain but felt strongly about. I let it all happen. Then, after the plates were cleared and the kids were in the yard and my daughter had taken her daughter down to the dock to look for frogs, I said to my wife and my brother-in-law, "I'd like to talk to the two of you, just for a few minutes, inside." My wife looked at me. Something moved across her face very quickly. "Warren, inside," I said. "Please." My son stayed nearby. He didn't come into the room. This was my moment, not his, and he understood that, but he stayed nearby. I knew he was there, in the living room, with the lake visible through the big windows and the sound of the grandkids' voices drifting in from outside. I told them what I knew. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't use accusatory language. I had spent a long time the previous night thinking about how I wanted to do this, and I had decided that I wanted to do it cleanly. My wife started to cry almost immediately. My brother-in-law went very pale and started to say something, and I held up my hand and he stopped. I told them what I knew about the relationship. I told them what I knew about the money. I set 2 pieces of paper on the coffee table. A summary my son had helped me put together, just the key facts and dates and amounts. I didn't need them to confess. I didn't need the drama of a denial. I just needed them to understand that I knew and that it was over. My wife said, "Warren, please let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said. And I meant it, not in a cold way, but in the way of a man who has genuinely run out of explanations to want. I told them I had already spoken to an attorney by phone that morning. I told them I would be filing for divorce and that I expected full repayment of the money that had been moved, and that I had documentation of all of it. I told my brother-in-law that I thought he should tell his wife the truth before I did, and that he had a limited amount of time to make that decision. Then I said something that I had also thought about the night before. Lying there in the dark, I said, "I genuinely hope that whatever you two have is worth it. I hope it's the thing that lasts, because you've burned down everything else." I left them in the living room. I went out to the dock. My son followed me out a few minutes later and stood beside me, and neither of us spoke for a while. Below us, the water was moving the way lake water moves in summer, slow and dark and unconcerned with any of it. "You okay?" he said. "No," I said, "but I will be." He nodded. We stood there together. 40 minutes later, my brother-in-law's truck was gone. My wife spent most of the rest of that day in the back bedroom. My daughter knew something was wrong but didn't push. She's always been perceptive, my daughter. Always known when to wait. My son-in-law took the kids out to rent a kayak. My sister-in-law sat with me on the porch in the late afternoon, and I think she had begun to sense something because she kept looking at me in a way that was careful and worried. I didn't tell her that day. That was her husband's responsibility, not mine, and I was going to give him the chance to do it right. He did, eventually. He told her that night, after he'd driven home. She called me the following week, crying in a way that I recognized. The kind of crying that has no particular target because the grief is bigger than any single person to direct it at. We talked for a long time. She apologized to me, which was unnecessary. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. She said she'd always known something was wrong but had never let herself look at it directly. I told her I understood that completely. I understood it completely. The divorce took 11 months. It was not friendly, but it was not catastrophic. My wife did not contest the financial claims. I think she understood that contesting them would have meant a worse outcome for her in other ways. I got the lake house. That mattered to me. She got the house in the city, which had always been more hers than mine, if I'm honest. She picked it, decorated it, hosted in it. I'd lived in it. I've lived at the lake house 3 seasons out of 4 now for almost 2 years. I have a garden that is genuinely out of control in ways I find satisfying. My son drives up most months and we fish off the dock and cook whatever we catch badly and drink beer on the porch and watch whatever game is on. My daughter brings the grandkids up every summer and they chase each other around the yard and come back inside sunburned and sandy and full of opinions about everything. My sister-in-law finalized her own divorce 8 months after mine. She's doing well, or as well as someone does with a wound like that. We still talk. We've become, oddly, better friends than we were when we were family. There's something clarifying about shared damage, I think. You stop performing and just talk. My brother-in-law. I don't know where he is now, and I find I don't want to. That's not bitterness. It's more like the feeling of setting something heavy down and walking away from it. I carried the weight of what he did for a while, and then I put it down. I think about those 40 minutes sometimes. The drive to the marina. The parking lot, the permits, the easy conversation with the dock attendant about whether the bluegill had been biting. The drive back. The cold coffee cups in my hands. How close I came to not walking down that hallway. How different the end of this story might have looked if I'd called her name from the kitchen, if she'd called back, if I'd sat down and waited for her to appear and handed her a cup of coffee and we'd looked out at the lake together and I'd never known. I'm glad I know. That surprises people sometimes when I say it, but I mean it. Whatever the last 2 years have cost me, they've given me back something I didn't realize I'd been missing. The feeling of living in a true version of my own life, not a comfortable fiction, not a warm and familiar lie. My granddaughter called me last week to tell me she had drawn another horse. This one was wearing a graduation cap. She had given him a briefcase. She could not explain the briefcase, but remained confident in the choice. I laughed for a long time after I hung up. The lake is very quiet in October. The leaves come down fast and the water goes a color that I can't describe in any satisfying way. It's not gray and it's not blue and it's not brown. It's something between all of them that only exists in the fall. I sit on the dock most mornings with my coffee and watch the light come up over the tree line and think about what it means to start over at 63. It means something different than it would have at 30. At 30, starting over feels like standing at a trailhead with the whole day in front of you. At 63, it feels more like stepping off a long train at the end of a long trip and realizing the town you've arrived in is stranger and quieter and smaller than you expected. But the air is clean and you slept well, and you have nowhere to be for a while. I don't know what comes next. That's different too. For 40 years I knew what was coming next, or thought I did. Now I make coffee and walk out to the dock and watch the herons land on the posts, and I genuinely don't know what the day will bring. And some mornings that is frightening, and some mornings it is the closest thing to freedom I have ever felt. My son is coming up this weekend. He said he'd bring the good rods. I told him I'd make chili, the real kind, the kind his grandfather used to make with dried chills that took half a day to do properly. He said that sounded right. It does. It sounds exactly right. I've had a lot of time to sit with all of this. 2 years of mornings on that dock, watching the light move across the water, turning the whole thing over in my head, the way you turn a stone over to see what's living underneath it. What I keep coming back to is not the betrayal itself, though that's there too, always will be, but the shape of it. The way it required so much sustained effort from two people who knew me well. Every small lie has to be maintained. Every false explanation has to be remembered and repeated. Every normal moment, the anniversary toasts, the family dinners, the handshakes and hugs, has to be performed while carrying the weight of what's actually true. That is exhausting work, and it has a cost, not a cosmic cost, not some spiritual reckoning I can point to. Just the ordinary, practical cost of living a dishonest life for long enough that the dishonesty becomes the structure holding everything else up. When it collapsed completely. That's not fate, that's just how it works. My son carried something heavy for 6 weeks because he was trying to be careful, trying to be sure, trying to betray me the right way instead of just the fast way. That took more intelligence than most people give a 34-year-old credit for. He could have called me the day he found out, panicked, thrown the whole thing into chaos. Instead, he thought about what I would actually need. He thought about my sister-in-law, who didn't know. He thought about documentation and timing and what would hold up if things got complicated. He did the harder thing because he understood that the harder thing was the right thing. I don't take credit for that. He built that in himself. But I am proud of it in a way I don't have good words for. And I've thought about my own part in this. Not in a self-punishing way, I've been careful about that, but honestly, I trusted completely because it felt like the right thing to do in a long marriage in a close family. I stopped watching because watching felt like suspicion, and suspicion felt like an accusation I wasn't willing to make without cause. That's not stupidity, but it's something worth knowing about yourself. Trust without any attention at all is not a virtue, it's closer to a habit. And habits, when they go unexamined long enough, can be exploited by people who understand them better than you do. What I took from all of this, the thing I'd tell anyone who asked, is that the quality of your life is mostly determined by the quality of your attention. Not paranoia, not suspicion, just honest attention. To the people around you, to the facts in front of you, to the gap between what someone says and what the evidence shows. My son had that quality. I had let mine go soft. The difference between us in those 6 weeks was that he kept his eyes open and I had learned over 40 years to keep mine comfortably closed. I'm 63. I live at a lake in October. I make chili from dried chiles and watch herons land on the dock posts and answer phone calls for a 5-year-old about horses and graduation caps. It's a smaller life than the one I thought I had, and it is, in almost every way that matters, more honest. I'll take that. I'll take it without hesitation.